In 1492, Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic, covering 6,800 kilometers and eventually reaching the Americas. In the centuries that followed, that geographical discovery completely reshaped the global balance of power. Yet more than 1,600 years before Columbus set sail, a Chinese explorer departed westward from Chang'an, the capital of the Han Empire. Over 13 years, he undertook a transcontinental journey of more than 13,000 kilometers. The Silk Road he opened up would profoundly influence the geopolitical landscape of Eurasia for over a millennium. Later historians have often compared him to Columbus, regarding him as a great explorer who altered the course of world history. He not only opened the door to East-West exchange at the time, but his impact on China and Asia can still be felt today. His journeys and his records remain indispensable to the study of Asian history. Today, our video focuses on this most legendary Chinese explorer who pioneered the Silk Road, recreating his epic journey and his dramatic, eventful life. In 126 BC, at the northwestern frontier of the Han Dynasty, a patrol of border guards stopped 3 travelers coming from the west outside the fortifications. The man walking in front wore nomadic clothing, his face gaunt and drawn. Behind him were a man clearly also dressed in Xiongnu attire and a Xiongnu woman. The 3 had no official travel documents issued by the Han government, no identity tallies for verification, and no accompanying retinue. The border guards immediately grew wary and surrounded them in the middle of the road. The man at the front identified himself as Zhang Qian. Though weakened and short of breath from the long trek, he told the soldiers, blocking his way in an unequivocal tone, that he was a Han court gentleman who had been ordered to undertake a mission to the Greater Yuezhi 13 years earlier. All the soldiers present looked at one another. None of them had been guarding the border 13 years ago. This extraordinary news was reported level by level, and ultimately officials had to verify its truth. Some older border officials vaguely recalled that 13 years ago, the imperial court had indeed sent a mission of over 100 men westward beyond the frontier. Their objective and their orders had been kept strictly secret. After that, there had been no further news. The court had received not a single report, nor had any survivors ever been found. Now, a man in nomadic clothes, accompanied by a Hu follower and a Xiongnu wife, was actually claiming to be the Han envoy who had been missing for so many years. Could this be possible? But when the border officials saw the man who called himself Zhang Qian, all doubt melted away. The middle-aged man, dressed like a Xiongnu but bearing Han features, held a wooden staff in his hands. It was taller than an ordinary walking stick, an envoy's tally. Its black wooden shaft was straight and long, topped with metal fittings that represented the emperor's authority, and hanging below them were what had once been pure white yak-tail tassels. 13 years of wind-blown sand, dust, and hard travel had worn most of those tassels away, leaving only a few strands that swayed gently in the cold northwest wind. This was the imperial envoy's tally, the proof of his identity that he had preserved with his life. The border official took the staff, examined it repeatedly, and verified its authenticity. The frontier post immediately sealed the news and dispatched the fastest relay riders to deliver word to the commandery seat. Upon receiving the report, the commandery governor personally made arrangements as a matter of the highest priority. Fresh horses were provided for Zhang Qian and his 2 companions. Relay carriages were prepared, and they were escorted from one post station to the next along the official road. No sooner had one carriage arrived at a station than the next team of horses was ready. The urgent report traveled even faster than Zhang Qian himself, all the way to Chang'an. When this news entered Weiyang Palace, the Han-Xiongnu War was at its most critical stage. Emperor Wu was already preparing to launch offensive campaigns, but he still lacked reliable intelligence on the western reaches of the Xiongnu. Although his ambitions were vast, he was not yet fully confident. At that moment, the urgent report arrived. The envoy he had sent out 13 years before had suddenly returned alive. What had he experienced? What had he seen? What had he gained? What had he brought back? One can imagine the young emperor pacing back and forth before the audience hall, waiting for the relay carriage to enter Chang'an.
13 years earlier, the Han Dynasty knew almost nothing about the Western world. Since the founding of the Han, the greatest threat from the north had always been the Xiongnu. The dynasty had long relied on marriage alliances, gifts, and border defenses to maintain the situation, but these measures could only temporarily reduce the conflicts. They could not change the reality that the Xiongnu held the strategic initiative. The young Emperor Wu, after taking personal control of the government, wanted to strike the Xiongnu proactively. To do this, he planned to make contact with a powerful group said to live west of the Xiongnu, called the Greater Yuezhi. The Yuezhi were enemies of the Xiongnu and had been defeated by them. If the Han could send someone to find the Yuezhi and persuade them to attack the Xiongnu from the west, the Xiongnu would be trapped in a two-front war. The problem was that no one knew where the Yuezhi were. Someone had to risk passing through Xiongnu-controlled territory, find the Yuezhi, and establish ties. Emperor Wu therefore issued an edict recruiting from within the court anyone willing to undertake this task. Zhang Qian was, at that time, merely a young palace guard and attendant, a court gentleman in his 20s, and he voluntarily stepped forward. It is important to explain that during the Han Dynasty, court gentlemen were the emperor's personal bodyguards. They were not only responsible for the emperor's safety, but were also future political talents, personally chosen and cultivated by the emperor. Thus, the young Zhang Qian's departure was at once an act of his own volunteering and a result of the emperor's long observation and trust in him. The court organized a mission of over 100 men for him. Among his companions was a Hu man named Tangyifu, who may even have been a Xiongnu captured and enslaved earlier. Tangyifu was familiar with the grassland environment, expert at riding and archery, and naturally understood various Hu languages. He soon became Zhang Qian's indispensable assistant. Around 138 BC, this modestly sized mission, carrying secret orders and a large quantity of gifts and supplies, formally departed Chang'an and headed west. As a Han envoy, Zhang Qian received an imperial tally personally bestowed by Emperor Wu, a mark of the emperor's regard and expectations, and the heavy trust of the entire empire. However, beyond that, once they left Han territory, the Han Empire could offer him no further help. At that time, the empire was still in a period of building up its strength. The He corridor, the Ordos loop, and the lands north and south of the Gobi, regions that would later become imperial territory, were all still in Xiongnu hands. Zhang Qian had no army, no guides, not even continuous logistical support. The only thing Zhang Qian and his men could hope was that this relatively small mission, led by Tangyifu, could cross the Xiongnu-controlled area without attracting attention. But that hope was vanishingly slim. After leaving the Han Empire's western border, Zhang Qian and his party entered the He corridor. This was the necessary passage to the Western world, and it was on this very road that Zhang Qian's mission was discovered by the Xiongnu. Xiongnu cavalry, arriving in overwhelming numbers, surrounded them. At this point, it likely had been less than a month since they had left Chang'an, and they had probably covered no more than 600 kilometers. Yes, in the Han Empire of that time, less than 500 kilometers west of the capital, lay a region where Xiongnu forces were massed in great strength. Resistance was utterly meaningless. After discovering Zhang Qian's identity as a Han envoy, the Xiongnu did not kill him.
Instead, they escorted him to the royal court of the Xiongnu and handed him over to the Xiongnu for judgment. The conversation between the Xiongnu and Zhang Qian was brief. Zhang Qian did not hide his purpose. He requested that the Xiongnu let him continue west to find the Greater Yuezhi. The Xiongnu sneered and shot back a very direct question. If the Xiongnu wanted to cross Han territory to contact the southern Yue kingdom south of Han, would the Han court allow it, no matter what we actually intended to do? Indeed, Zhang Qian was no ordinary lost traveler. He was an envoy of a rival state, attempting to cross hostile territory to build a military alliance. The Xiongnu had no reason whatsoever to let him continue west. But perhaps because they wanted to extract more information from this former close attendant of the emperor, perhaps to keep a bargaining chip for future negotiations, or more likely because the Xiongnu wanted to break this young envoy, wear down his will, and make him submit to the Xiongnu. After all, countless Han people had surrendered to the Xiongnu after defeat in the past. Thus, Zhang Qian was kept among the Xiongnu. 1 year passed, then another. His original mission was gradually broken up. Some men were killed, others were relocated elsewhere. Zhang Qian could not contact the Han court, nor did he know whether Chang'an was still waiting for his news. To soften Zhang Qian, the Xiongnu even arranged a Xiongnu wife for him. Outwardly, Zhang Qian accepted this arrangement, and he even had a child with this Xiongnu woman. He began wearing nomadic clothes and adapted to life on the steppe, appearing not very different from other outsiders who had been absorbed by the Xiongnu. But both the Shiji and the Hanshu deliberately leave one line. They detained Qian for more than 10 years, gave him a wife, and he had a son. Yet Qian held the Han tally and never lost it. The Xiongnu could change his clothes, his dwelling, and his daily life, but they could not make him surrender that staff that represented his status as a Han envoy. After 10 years, the tassels on the staff had become threadbare, yet Zhang Qian kept it by his side the entire time. That tally could not protect him, nor could it help him escape from the Xiongnu. Its sole function was to constantly remind him that he was not an ordinary Han commoner who had moved to the grasslands, but an envoy with a mission still unfulfilled. Those 10 years of captivity were not entirely empty. Zhang Qian lived long among the Xiongnu, interacting with the local tribes, observing how they migrated, how they chose water sources and pasture land, studying the lay of the land. After more than 10 years, the Xiongnu's surveillance of him finally slackened. Zhang Qian seized the opportunity and, taking the still loyal Tangyifu and a very few surviving members of his original party, fled Xiongnu control. Just a handful of men escaping from the jaws of death. Behind them, left in the Xiongnu camp, were his wife and son. Ahead of them, under the starry night, stretched the boundless desert and steppe. Zhang Qian did not hesitate. He chose to continue westward. He was determined to complete the mission that had already been delayed for 10 years. Zhang Qian and Tangyifu fled west for dozens of days. They passed through the vast territory of the western Xiongnu, gradually moving beyond the region the Xiongnu could directly control. Ahead of them appeared a state the Han Dynasty had never formally contacted before, Dayuan.
When Zhang Qian arrived in Dayuan, he had nothing. The 100-man mission was long gone, and the Han gifts had all been scattered. This place was extremely far from Han territory. He had no army to display power, nor could he immediately prove that the Han would honor any promises. The only bargaining chips he could use were his own identity as an envoy and a Western region's state's imagination of the Han dynasty in the distant east. Dayuan was located in the oasis region of eastern Central Asia, with walled cities, farmland, and large numbers of fine horses. The locals had long heard that far to the east there was a Han dynasty with a vast population and abundant resources. Zhang Qian quickly judged that what Dayuan truly needed
was not a plea from a castaway, but an opportunity that could lead to the Han Dynasty. When he met the king of Dayuan, he did not hide his failed circumstances. He directly explained his mission. He was an envoy ordered by the Han court to go to the Greater Yuezhi, and because the route had been blocked by the Xiongnu, he had only escaped and reached here after 10 years. If Dayuan was willing to send people to escort him to the Yuezhi, then upon his return to Han, he would see to it that Han rewarded Dayuan with a great quantity of riches. The key to this speech lay not in how much wealth Zhang Qian promised. It lay in using future Han diplomatic and trade relations to trade for the passage that Dayuan could provide right now. And this passage was westward, not eastward, to fight the Xiongnu directly. The king of Dayuan accepted. He ordered men to render Zhang Qian assistance, arranging interpreters and guides, and sending him further west to Kangju. After arriving in Kangju, the local ruler there then forwarded Zhang Qian to the region where the Greater Yuezhi were located. This process involved no war, nor any intervention by Han troops. Without a single soldier, Zhang Qian relied on his own judgment to get two states that had never before had formal dealings with the Han to successively participate in a Han envoy's operation. This was also how official Silk Road diplomacy first operated. He was the first to make the Western region's states see the phrase Han envoy as an identity worth assisting, and he was the first to convert the Han dynasty's future resources into diplomatic credit that could be used in the present. Later, the Shiji would appraise Zhang Qian as strong-willed, generous, trustworthy, and beloved by the foreign peoples. This assessment does not mean that he obtained everyone's unconditional support through personal charisma alone. Rather, it means that he could rapidly establish relationships of continued cooperation in unfamiliar states. He dared to explain his own situation, could accurately gauge the other party's interests, and then linked Han's strength with the other party's needs.
Zhang Qian finally reached the Greater Yuezhi, only to discover that the Han court's original intelligence was already out of date. After being defeated by the Xiongnu, the Greater Yuezhi had migrated all the way west, eventually entering the Amu Darya Valley, what is now Uzbekistan and northern Afghanistan, and conquering the kingdom of Daxia, established by descendants of Greeks. They had already acquired fertile lands, were far from any direct Xiongnu threat, and their lives were gradually becoming settled and stable. Zhang Qian stayed among the Yuezhi for more than a year, repeatedly explaining the Han plan, but he never obtained a formal commitment to an alliance. Judged by the mission set 13 years earlier, this expedition had reached this point as a failure. Zhang Qian had not brought back an army that could attack the Xiongnu in a pincer movement, nor had he persuaded the Yuezhi king to turn east again. But he did not immediately return to the Han. Instead, he stayed between the Yuezhi and Daxia, investigating a world the Han dynasty had never truly come into contact with. Daxia was different from the steppe lands Zhang Qian had passed through before. Here there were fixed cities, farmland, and thriving markets. Merchants brought goods from many different directions. Though Daxia itself was militarily weak, it sat at the intersection of multiple communication routes. Westwards, one could contact Parthia. Southwards, one could go to India. Northeastwards, one could approach Xiongnu-controlled territory via Kangju and Dayuan. Zhang Qian began to ask about these states' locations, distances, populations, military strength, products, and political relationships. He did not only record the places he had personally set foot in, he also questioned merchants and locals about even more distant lands they knew of. In the markets of Daxia, Zhang Qian saw two familiar items: cloth produced in Shu and Qiong bamboo staffs. How had these goods, originally from southwest China, appeared thousands of miles away in Central Asia? Zhang Qian asked the local merchants and got the reply that they came from India to the southeast. Daxia merchants traveled there to trade and then brought the goods back to Central Asia. This answer made Zhang Qian realize that, completely unbeknownst to the Han, goods from China's southwest had already entered India and from there flowed on to Central Asia. There existed not just the northern route passing through the Hershi corridor and Xiongnu territory, a southern passage might also exist. He began to think about how the Han could bypass the Xiongnu, how it could enter Central Asia from different directions, and how it could transform the transit routes scattered in the hands of merchants into roads that the state could use. From this moment on, Dayuan, Kangju, Greater Yuezhi, Daxia, Parthia and India were no longer isolated names. Zhang Qian connected them by direction, route and interest. A map spanning East Asia, Central Asia, South Asia and West Asia, with two routes, one north and one south, gradually took shape in his mind. And this was the embryonic form of the later northern and southern Silk Roads. After gathering sufficient intelligence, Zhang Qian left the Greater Yuezhi and began his journey back east. He did not retrace the route he had taken on his first westward journey. Instead, taking Tangyifu and his companions, he detoured southwards along the continuous Kunlun Mountains, traveling east through what is today the southern part of Xinjiang, preparing to re-enter the Han Dynasty along the northern edge of the present-day Tibetan Plateau. But fate dealt him yet another crushing blow. On this southern route, Zhang Qian and his party once again fell into Xiongnu hands. The historical records do not describe the Xiongnu Chanyu's shock or fury at capturing this Han envoy a second time. They only record the result. Again, Zhang Qian was not killed. He was sent back to his Xiongnu wife and placed under detention once more. The histories leave no detailed account of this second period of captivity, interrogation, and daily life. But a year later, the Xiongnu Chanyu died, and a succession struggle broke out immediately. Different tribes began to choose new loyalties, and the forces that had maintained order around the royal court were swept up in the fight. For Zhang Qian, who had been held for so long, this internal chaos meant an opportunity had appeared. Zhang Qian took his Xiongnu wife and Tangyifu, who had shared life and death with him, and the three of them fled the Xiongnu-controlled area amid the turmoil. He very likely had to make the agonizing decision to leave behind his young son, who could not keep up on such a flight. This was an escape even more difficult and dangerous than the first one from the Xiongnu. 3 people, without adequate preparation, probably relying entirely on Tangyifu's and his wife's familiarity with the grasslands, so that while dodging Xiongnu soldiers, they could also survive in the barren desert steppe with almost no supplies. The journey from the Xiongnu royal court to the Han Empire's frontier covered 1,000 kilometers. We do not know how long they walked or how bitter the trek was. But Zhang Qian still carried that Han tally. In the end, the 3 finally crossed the Xiongnu-controlled border and entered the territory of the Han Empire. The Shiji sums up this epic escape in one extremely terse sentence. In the beginning, when Qian set out, there were over 100 men. Gone for 13 years, only 2 returned. 13 years after over 100 men had left Chang'an, the only members of the original mission who came back were Zhang Qian and Tangyifu. And following them into the Han Empire was the Xiongnu wife who had once been forced upon him. Although the original goal of an alliance with the Greater Yuezhi had not been realized, the crucial information Zhang Qian brought back about the northern states such as Dayuan and Kangju, and the important lead that a passage to India existed in the southwest, still brought tremendous surprise and delight to Emperor Wu. This was exactly when Emperor Wu was launching an all-out counteroffensive against the Xiongnu, and the strategic intelligence Zhang Qian provided was of vital importance. What Emperor Wu equally valued was the grassland knowledge Zhang Qian had acquired over those 13 years. Not long after Zhang Qian's return, the Han General-in-Chief Wei Qing once again led an army to strike the Xiongnu. Zhang Qian accompanied the army beyond the frontier as a colonel. Compared with other Han commanders, his most important ability was not leading cavalry, but his familiarity with the routes, water sources, and pastures in Xiongnu territory. During this campaign, relying on his understanding of the terrain, water, and grass, Zhang Qian ensured that the army did not fall into hardship and exhaustion. After the battle, he was enfeoffed as Marquis of Bowang. From a captive held by the Xiongnu to a Han Marquis, Zhang Qian's prestige reached its zenith at this time. The knowledge he had gained in the western regions was now serving both diplomacy and warfare. But 2 years later, the situation changed suddenly. The Han once again dispatched troops. Zhang Qian, in the position of commandant of the guards, and General Li Guang were to advance from Yobei Ping on separate routes, with an agreement to coordinate with each other. Li Guang's force was the first to encounter the Xiongnu's main army. They were encircled, fought continuously for 2 days, and suffered severe casualties. Zhang Qian did not arrive on time. By the time his troops reached the area, the Xiongnu had already withdrawn. According to Han military law, failing to arrive by the appointed time was punishable by death. Zhang Qian paid a ransom to commute his sentence, but was stripped of his marquisate and reduced to a commoner. At this critical juncture, it was again Zhang Qian's profound understanding of the Western world that allowed him to regain the emperor's favor. By this time, the Han army had already begun to strike the Xiongnu repeatedly in the Heси direction. Seizing this shift, Zhang Qian directly proposed to Emperor Wu an alliance with the kingdom of Wusun. Wusun was located east of Dayuan, had once been under the dual influence of the Greater Yuezhi and the Xiongnu, and possessed powerful cavalry. If the Han could get in touch with Wusun and pry it away from the Xiongnu's western flank would lose an important foothold. Through Wusun, the Han could also continue making contact with Dayuan, Kangju, the Greater Yuezhi, and Daxia. This time, what Zhang Qian proposed was no longer the kind of plan to find a single ally, as he had 13 years earlier. It was a layered Western regions strategy. First, win over Wusun to weaken the Xiongnu's western wing, then use Wusun as a transit point to dispatch envoys to states further west, and ultimately build a long-term connection between the Han and Central Asia. This grand yet executable diplomatic grand strategy revealed Zhang Qian's true character as an explorer and a diplomatic genius. Several years later, he finally obtained another chance to set out.
In 119 BC, Zhang Qian undertook his second expedition to the western regions. This time, what he led was no longer a small party that could vanish at any moment after entering enemy territory. The mission comprised 300 men, each equipped with 2 horses, accompanied by tens of thousands of cattle and sheep, and an enormous quantity of gold, silk, and other gifts. 13 years earlier, Zhang Qian had not even known where the Greater Yuezhi was. Now, he was able to prepare personnel, livestock, supplies, and state letters according to the distances and needs of different states. His goal was no longer to negotiate with just a single country, but to build a diplomatic network capable of expanding in multiple directions simultaneously. The mission first headed for Wusun. The internal situation in Wusun proved more complicated than the Han had foreseen. The aging Wusun king had difficulty fully controlling his tribes. There were different factions within the state, and many had long feared the Xiongnu and did not really understand how powerful the Han truly was. Zhang Qian's proposal that Wusun move back east to its former territory and jointly contain the Xiongnu with the Han was not immediately accepted. During his first expedition, if the Greater Yuezhi had refused an alliance, the entire mission would have lost its objective. During this second expedition, Zhang Qian had long prepared a different approach. Within the mission he had brought were multiple deputy envoys holding tallies. When the negotiations with Wusun did not achieve the expected result, Zhang Qian immediately dispatched these deputy envoys separately. Carrying the Han court's state letters and gifts, they set off for Dayuan, Kangju, the Greater Yuezhi, Daxia, Parthia, India, Khotan, and other states. This step truly transformed the scale of Han engagement with the western regions. In the past, a single envoy advanced along a single road. If captured or rejected, the whole mission was cut short. The second expedition organized by Zhang Qian, however, could continuously branch out. The main mission reached Wusun, and from there multiple deputy missions fanned out toward Central, South, and West Asia. Each of these teams could negotiate on behalf of the Han, bestow gifts, survey routes, and invite local envoys to return east. Here, for the first time, the Silk Road shifted from a single person's adventure into an organized, detachable, and continuously expandable state diplomatic operation. Zhang Qian did not personally set foot in all these countries, but this does not diminish his role. On the contrary, he no longer needed to walk every road alone. Using the geographical knowledge and interstate relations established during his first expedition, he sent other envoys to farther regions he himself had never reached. A little more than a year later, these dispatched envoys began to return. They did not return alone, but brought with them personnel sent by various states into the Han Empire. Wusun also sent several dozen envoys, bringing horses, to accompany Zhang Qian on his eastward journey and personally observe the population, cities, and wealth of the Han. The flow between east and west began to become two-way. Han envoys continuously traveled west, while envoys from various states moved east along the same network. The Han no longer learned of Central Asia merely through hearsay, and the various states no longer imagined the East only through the silk that passed through many hands. This web of connections continued to stretch further west. Later, when Han envoys reached Parthia, the Parthian king sent a large force of cavalry to welcome them at his eastern frontier. Parthian envoys then followed the Han envoys back to the Han dynasty, bringing their own country's gifts and entertainers from even further west. Zhang Qian himself never walked to the Parthian capital, nor did he see the Mediterranean world with his own eyes. But the diplomatic network he had designed had already crossed beyond Daxia and entered the West Asian communication system controlled by Parthia. For the first time, an official connection capable of two-way travel was established between the Han dynasty and the Persian cultural sphere. The door to official East-West exchange had finally been pushed open.
Not long after Zhang Qian's second expedition, the Han missions sent westward rapidly multiplied. A round trip to distant states could take 8 or 9 years. Missions would depart from Chang'an, pass through the He corridor and the Tarim Basin, and then move from one state to the next. Missions to nearer places were dispatched frequently, while those heading the farthest continued on toward Daxia, Parthia, and India. These roads did not belong to the Han state alone. Each segment of the journey was maintained jointly by different powers, oasis cities, merchants, guides, and interpreters. Nor could many merchants travel the entire way from Chang'an to the far west. Silk and other goods often passed through many hands before finally entering Central and West Asia. But Zhang Qian made the Han dynasty an active and sustained participant in this network. Han silk, lacquerware, and other manufactured goods flowed west along these routes. Fine horses from Central Asia, along with grapes, alfalfa, and other products, also steadily entered the east. As the traffic continued, new crops, crafts, music, performances, and knowledge were transferred between different civilizations. This exchange was not entirely accomplished by Zhang Qian personally, nor did it spring up immediately after a single one of his missions.
Zhang Qian's role was to provide the political conditions that allowed this exchange to expand and endure. Beginning with him, the Han Dynasty's actions in the western regions were no longer a matter of accidentally encountering visitors from afar, nor of passively waiting for vague news brought by merchants. They became a deliberate state investment of personnel, livestock, gold, and silk, managing trans-regional relationships over the long term. This was a new form of diplomacy. It had clear state objectives, yet also relied on the cooperation of partner states. It served the war against the Xiongnu, but did not stop at military alliance. It began with a single envoy's mission and ultimately formed a multi-state network covering Central, South, and West Asia. After returning to Chang'an from his second expedition, Zhang Qian was appointed to a high-ranking official position overseeing foreign affairs. Slightly more than a year later, he passed away. More than 2,000 years later, trains still run westward along the Heshi corridor and the Central Asian passages. The means of transport have changed, but the continental direction that Zhang Qian first connected remains clearly visible. What history remembers is not simply a man who traveled very far. It is an envoy in worn and shabby clothes holding a Han tally who, after 10 years of captivity, still chose to keep going west. Zhang Qian.